Hello everybody, how you doing? Today I wanted to do a different video. I wanted to analyze Harry Potter, the series as a whole, essentially, through a Catholic lens. Now, I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter, but I encounter a lot of anti-Harry Potter sentiment within my own religious community. I'm a Catholic, and I've never really quite understood the animosity. I've looked into the different arguments because I do try to want to be charitable and whatnot. Like I'm not saying that if you don't like Harry Potter as a Catholic, you're being stupid. That's not what I'm saying. And nor am I going to be responding to objections. This video is more so going to be me doing an overview of this series and explaining why it's great, and hopefully that can just kind of do the work for answering the objections. So there's a few reasons why I think Harry Potter is incredible. I think it's one of, if not the greatest works of low fantasy ever produced. Low fantasy, for those who don't know, to contrast it with high fantasy. I'm going to start with high fantasy. High fantasy is something like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, or even Star Wars functions as high fantasy. That's where it takes place completely in another realm, right? Like just this totally different world than ours. Whereas low fantasy is one that takes place in a parallel world or hidden world within our own, right? So Harry Potter functions as low fantasy because the wizarding world is hidden within the Muggle or non-magical people's world. But as the series goes on, it takes on a lot more elements of high fantasy. So first off, Harry Potter is a celebration of the classical Western tradition. Now, what do I mean by that? For anyone who's been classically educated, they would know what I'm talking about. And J.K. Rowling herself, she was classically educated, and she kind of imbues this wonderful mix of Greco-Roman mythology and just like the classical world, antiquity, Germanic, kind of pagan folkloric ideas, and Christianity, right? So all three of those systems, so to speak, are all kind of blended together to create something totally unique, in my opinion. Hogwarts functions almost like a microcosm of the world. It's quite interesting. It can also be seen as a sort of figure of the church, right? Hogwarts isn't just a place where students go to learn how to cast spells. It's way more than that. And like I said, because it's based off of the classical Western tradition, those kind of three systems being in there, the classical Western education is about forming the entire person, right? It's not just concerned with merely teaching you information or, turning you into a factory worker, right? Like the, our current model of public education, which, as we all know, is just the worst. Hogwarts is kind of like it's kind of an idealized school, right? Because it's what we all wish it's the place we all wish we went to school to learn, the ways of the world, right? And to learn our ancient traditions, right? The trivium and the quadrivium. And it's Hogwarts is just it's this sacred institution of learning, right? So it allows you Hogwarts, they don't just teach you mere information, they teach you practical skills. They teach you they do teach you valuable information like history, and that's the thing, you have to study all the subjects, right? So in Western classical learning, you also have to study all the subjects, right? The trivium and the quadrivium, right? And so in Hogwarts, you have to study all the subjects to be a complete wizard, right? So there's moral formation there. And it also allows the students, and by extension the reader or the viewer, to fall in love with education and the classical Western tradition, right? It re-enchants you it re-enchants the world, essentially, which is what I think all good fantasy should do. Tolkien does this very well, of course. Lewis does this very well. And now if Tolkien and C.S. Lewis are the apex of high fantasy, I would say Harry Potter is the apex of low fantasy. There's constant references throughout the story, lots of symbols related to classical mythology, right? You have magical creatures. You have almost holy relics, right? There's objects that have spiritual power imbued in them, right? Like the Sword of Gryffindor. This is something very reminiscent of Arthurian legend, right? Excalibur, or Norse mythology, Mjolnir, right? So you're going away from the kind of secular Muggle modern society, and you're going into just this enchanted, wonderful like the wizarding world. It's the magic isn't really, it's not Crowleyan, or what's the other, it's not Crowleyan, or like it's not a cult, right? The magic is it's just about the magic of learning and the Western tradition, like I said. Now, Hogwarts also feels like a kind of it's the ideal version of the world, right? It's almost like a Garden of Eden type figure. There's underworlds below, right, that Harry has to descend to in his journeys, which is part of the hero's journey. But it essentially is all under the watch of Dumbledore, right, who we come to learn is this sort of Merlinian, Odinic wanderer sage type, like you would see in Gandalf, or even Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? So Dumbledore fills that same role, right? And he almost, I'm not saying he literally is God in the story, but he functions almost like an icon of God the Father, right? Because everything seems to be under his providence. He is just the ultimate authority. He has all of the wisdom, and all the characters put their complete trust in him, right? So he is kind of like an icon of God the Father, right? And Harry, interestingly enough, is an icon for the second person in the Godhead, the Son, or Jesus, right? He offers, like I said, I meant to say I'm going to be spoiling this, but yes, of course, Harry fulfills the kind of image of Christ because he sacrifices himself so that others may live. But also, interestingly enough, Harry is an icon of Christ because he is not only trying to save the Gryffindors, right? He's not only, nor is he only trying to save the wizarding world. Harry, his sacrifice saves the wizarding and the Muggle worlds, right? So it's just like kind of like how Christ did not come just to save the Jewish people; he came to save all peoples, right? The Gentiles too. And not only is Harry a Christ figure, he's also a Moses figure. Right out of the get-go, in the first entry in the series, there's lots of Moses imagery. He's the little boy being delivered in the basket, right, to safety after, infanticide was going on. So Harry's parents got murdered, but he was carried to safety in the basket through Hagrid, who is the, hunter, groundskeeper character. He's one of the most popular characters, of course. He's half giant, which we'll maybe touch on that later. So Harry is also Moses-like because he was raised away from his own people, right? So he was raised in the Muggle world, and he knows the ways of the Muggles in a sense. Not completely, because of course we know his aunt and uncle were the worst, and so is his cousin, who's probably even worse. Traumatized him as a kid, but that sets the stage for the sort of contrast between the Muggle world and the Wizarding world, right? Now, it follows typically, like the typical hero's journey, right, of Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, right? So he gets reintroduced, or I guess not reintroduced because he didn't know yet, but so he gets thrusted into this unexpected quest, right? So he thinks his life is going to go this way, but then he meets Hagrid, right, who is kind of like a mentor character, and he gives him the letter finally to go to Hogwarts, where he learns that he's a wizard. He learns this whole backstory about his parents and Voldemort, right? Now, Voldemort is obviously an antichrist type figure. He just represents the total inversion of everything that is good, true, and beautiful. He wants immortality, right? Voldemort, flight from death. He is so scared of dying that he's willing to sacrifice his humanity to gain it, right? So he's, instead of, the kind of Christ way in which Christ gives his life so that we may have life, Voldemort takes the lives of others so that he may have more life, right? And he hides his the fractured pieces of his soul in the Horcruxes. And the Horcruxes are, occult objects which you could fill, the fractured part of the soul. And this is very similar to the way that, like the Masonic, objects and cursed objects, right? The way they have to destroy Horcruxes, right, through the Sword of Gryffindor is very similar to how, if you're a Catholic, you can go through a kind of a Masonic cleansing ritual. So if you had ancestors that were Masons that put curses on you and your family, you can undergo the ritualistic cleansing. And part of that is you have to take the cursed objects that your family has and you have to destroy it with some kind of weapon, right? In fact, I actually thinking about it now, I actually think I need to do that. So the other thing is that Harry Potter is an affirmation of moral realism, right? And what do I mean by that? Now, in the first one, Harry so he's in Hogwarts and he learns more about the world and just the mystery and the aura. It's very gothic. It's just a really cool atmosphere, right? He has to descend into the underworld, so to speak. This is a classic trope of the myths and tales of old, right? Like the Aeneid, right? The Odyssey. This is found in stories through all sorts of cultures, right? Now, he has to get past the three-headed dog, right? That is guarding the trap door to get to the Philosopher's Stone. That is obviously a reference to Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guarded the underworld in Greek mythology. And then he has to go through a series of trials, right? He has to he has to take what he learned throughout his year at Hogwarts and apply it in the real world, right? So he has to get past, bewitched plants that ensnare him and his two best friends, Ron and Hermione. And then he has to use his flying skills, right? So he has to use his broom to catch the key with the wings on it so that he can get through the door. And then through the door is finally the battle of the intellect, the chessboard. The chessboard is really interesting because obviously chess is kind of like it's a microcosm. I hate to use that word so much, but I like symbology, comparative religion, and studying all these things. So the chessboard is a kind of microcosm of, geopolitics, right? Because you have two factions, the king and the queen, they're pawns. And then you have ultimately the sort of Wizard of Oz, who's the person controlling everything, right? And so then they have to get through that, and all three characters learn to, they learn courage. They learn that magic is not merely just casting spells. It's also about being humble, loyal, brave, and you have to persevere, right? Now, Harry, once they get past the chessboard, he has to go alone, right? Another trope from classical mythology. He has to go and face whatever he doesn't even know what it's going to be. He thinks it's going to be Snape, which is the fun twist in the first entry. But he has to go face whatever the danger is alone, And now it's revealed that his professor, lo and behold, who had the turban the whole time, had Voldemort actually on the back of his head. And is that super creepy? Yes. And that adds to just the creepiness of Voldemort himself and just how perverted he is. Now, Voldemort, it's interesting. He, of course, is the Antichrist figure who I laid out, who murdered Harry's parents. And Harry was able to survive because his mother gave her life to protect him, right? Which, as Dumbledore later explains, leaves a mark, right? And it's not any kind of like external mark you could see or anywhere, but rather it's a mark almost on the soul. It's kind of like a sacrament, and it shields Harry from Voldemort, right? And this whole time, you kind of wonder, well, why? Because so Harry was able to survive Voldemort's curse because of what his mother did, and then you think it's going to be this whole, like they're going to explain it like a science, like this is how the magic did this and all that. No, you actually learn that. So Dumbledore tells him that because Harry thinks, it's got to be the stone, right? The stone gave me the power to do all this, and Dumbledore, no, this stone didn't really do anything, right? What really saved you was your mother's love, right? And Voldemort can't understand that, and the fact that he continues to not understand that will be his downfall, right? Now, going back to just bring it back to the reinforcement of moral realism. This is a contrast to Voldemort, who is a moral relativist. He even tempts Harry in the confrontation in the first entry with relativism. He tells him that there is no good or evil, only power, and those too weak to seek it. This is the bad guy telling you this. And Harry, in the fiercest, most boldest, rejection of relativism, says, no, you're a liar, Voldemort. That's bullshit. There's no good or evil, and you're the one telling me this? No, I reject that. And you could see how Harry, even though he's a kid, and he doesn't know how to, he can't epistemologically, metaphysically, philosophically explain why that is a false worldview, yet he still has the instinct. He has the heart of a child. And because he has that innocence, he was able to, he knows it's wrong deep down in his heart, right? And he was willing in that moment to fight Voldemort. And of course, Voldemort is not fully incarnate, right? He's a parasite living on the back of Quirrell, his professor's head. And so then they have the fight, and Quirrell is going to kill him, but Harry just puts his hands up, and when Quirrell touches his hands, whatever part he touched, it turns to stone, right? It almost like it gives him like it does in a sense, Harry, it gives him these cool spiritual powers, right? But it's nothing, it's not magic you can learn, right? It's magic that is, it's a spiritual mark on your soul that, like I said, it's like a baptism, right? And that's how he was able to defeat Voldemort. And you see constantly throughout all of these entries, Harry never wins because, and this is what I'm really trying to explain to a lot of my fellow Catholics when they think that the story is problematic. It's not, because it rejects moral relativism, and also it shows that evil is only really it's only really overcome through humility, right? Similar to how evil is overcome in the Lord of the Rings, right? Now, Harry never he is not able to defeat Voldemort. He doesn't beat Voldemort in the end because he knew more esoteric knowledge about magic, or he was just through sheer power and willpower, he was able to just get it out, and then he gets it. No, that he wins because he knows the power that the Dark Lord knoweth not, which is love. That's what the prophecy says. That's what we learn about in the 5th entry. Yeah, and I've tried and tried to, like I said, I've tried to look more into this to see where is all this problematic satanic stuff in the story. And to be quite honest with you guys, the more I look into it, the more Christian it actually seems to me. And I know I'm going to get the whole, well, that's not what Rowling intended. Or no, this. I mean, sure, probably not, but this is just how I read the story. Like I said, this is actually the mark of a great work of literature, is that it is very interpretable. It appeals to people of nearly all ages, all classes, all cultures. That's just what great stories do. Like that. Like, why do you think we're still reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, Dante's Inferno, Shakespeare to this day? It's because they harken back to timeless themes, right? Of courage, friendship, the struggle within, the battle between good versus evil. They're epics, right? Meaning they encompass all aspects of reality. Now, let me see what else I have in my notes. Yes, I think I mentioned that Hogwarts is what we all wish that our schools were like. Now, if you had the benefit of receiving classical education, it almost did feel like Hogwarts in a way. Retrospectively, you can kind of go back and think that. Of course, initially when I went to the classical school I went to in 11th grade, I hated it, but that was because I didn't truly understand the importance of it. And by the time I was a senior, and especially in hindsight, I can go back and think, yeah, that was Hogwarts, and it was pretty cool, Now, like I said, I'm not arguing that this is a Christian allegory one-to-one, but what I do think is that the story manifests symbolic structures that can be meaningfully interpreted through theological categories, right? Like I brought up Moses imagery, Christ imagery, and also the Trinitarian symbolism, which I have not fully elaborated on. So I established Dumbledore and Harry being sort of icons of God the Father and the Son. Now, the God the Holy Spirit is, you can read as Fawkes the Phoenix, Dumbledore's pet phoenix, who is just the coolest pet in all of literature. I can't even think of who comes close. Now, Fawkes is almost like the Holy Spirit, because not only is he a bird, which recalls the images that we typically use to signify the Holy Spirit, the dove, he also is kind of like the love that proceeds from the mutual knowledge between Harry and Dumbledore. He binds them together in a sense. Like I said, I know this is not, I'm not saying that this is accurate theology, but the overall structure, like I said, can be interpreted through theological categories. So Fawkes also, in a lot of ways, feels like the Holy Spirit in the way that he provides aid to the characters on their journey, right? So Harry, in the second movie, in his second descent into the underworld, where he goes to the Chamber of Secrets, he has to fight the basilisk, right? Now, the basilisk in the story, you learn, is this primordial ancient evil, right? It's a snake, right, which calls to mind images of Satan, right, and the demonic, right, and the fall of Eden, right. So you could see how the basilisk's infiltration of Hogwarts and him killing the Muggle-born students is almost like the fall of Eden, right? How the snake just kind of, the whisper of the serpent, right? Now, in the second one, it's interesting because we learn more about the relations of the different types of people within the wizarding world. So we learn that there are the purebloods, the sort of aristocratic, snobbery type people. Now, they're not all bad, of course, but the purebloods tend to lean more towards supremacy, right? They don't want non-magical people studying magic. They have a serious distrust of them because of conflicts in the past, which I wish the movie kind of talked about, but it's really more in the book. And then there is half-bloods, which is people like Harry. His mother was Muggle-born, but his dad is a wizard, and he's actually descended from the Peverell line, which recalls, the sort of lineage of Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. He's descended from the Númenóreans, right? So you can kind of see that connection. Now they also are not really the best character of people. If you look in the lore, a lot of the aristocratic pureblood families, they made their money in a lot of malicious ways, right? The dark magic trade, which is very reminiscent of our own world with the elites, being involved in the war on drugs and all that kind of stuff. You know all that, right? Now, the other interesting pureblood family who is very much against all of this stuff is the Weasleys, the family of Harry's best friend Ron. They are just the most ideal family, right? And the school I went to, I knew tons of families that were like this, right? And again, I'm trying to explain to these people that this story just it shows all that we value and hold sacred, essentially. Now the Weasleys are just a huge family, right? You have the loving father, the loving mother, and then the parents. They are poor because they choose to spend their money on having a bunch of kids, right? And obviously, is this put a lot of stress on Mr. Weasley? Yes, it does, but he just kind of pushes through, as any good father should, and father and husband. And they are very much against this sort of pureblood supremacy, right? As Arthur Weasley says to Lucius Malfoy, the father of Harry's rival character, we have a very different idea of what disgraces the name of wizard, right? Malfoy and the other pureblood types, they have a disdain for the Weasleys. They think they are an embarrassment to the wizarding world, partially because Arthur Weasley is so interested in the Muggle world. He's so interested in Muggle objects, Muggle thing, this and that. He thinks it's so interesting to me. It's so interesting to him. And that in a lot of ways mirrors, people like me, how I get so interested in other cultures than my own, It's a very wonderful gift to have, to be able to see the good in every culture, right? Now, you learn in the second one of this legendary location of the Chamber of Secrets, right? Which there had been tales long before, but no one actually thought it was real, right? And I think this is very telling because this is kind of how we view evil in our times now. We think, oh, well, it's all a social construct. It's just just do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anyone. There's no evil. That's all gone and whatnot. But of course, people are waking up to the fact that that is not the case. The Chamber of Secrets is opened again. It's this ancient sort of perennial evil. And the basilisk, the giant snake, like I was just talking about, that resides within the Chamber of Secrets, who he comes, in various ways, gets, through the castle and can navigate through the pipes or whatever. I know it's a little bit convoluted in that regard, but the basilisk is after muggle-born children, right? Like I just brought up, the pure blood supremacy type people. The basilisk is almost just the ultimate Malthusian, just like anti-human, just annihilator of the kind of pure blood aristocratic strata of the wizarding world. It's just like, it is just the, angel of death, right? Like and it's Medusa too. Like you look into its eyes and you die instantly just by looking it into the eyes. It's that insane how evil it is, right? Now Harry has to investigate, right, why how these attacks are happening, right? Like these muggle-born children they're getting petrified, right? And he doesn't understand how this works. But Ron's sister, Ginny, is taken to the Chamber of Secrets, right? She's held hostage, right? And interestingly enough, Ginny, she has Tom Riddle's diary, right? And I think Tom Riddle's diary was very prophetic because in a lot of ways, actually, the way it looks, the way it operates, it's almost like an artificial intelligence. I think J.K. Rowling is very prophetic in that regard. It's almost like a chat GPT, right? Like you can write things in it and it gives you a response. It kind of shows you, kind of illustrates Arthur C. Clarke's third law, I believe, about the indistinguishability of super advanced technology and magic, right? So Ginny is taken and she's held hostage, and Harry and Ron have to go and rescue her, right? And so of course they get separated because of the thing with the professor. Like I said, I can't go into too much detail of each one. If you guys want me to go into detail of each one, I could certainly do that. I'm just kind of giving a analysis of the series as a whole. Now, Harry has to go into the underworld, save the damsel in distress, and slay the serpent. Right? Those are classic tropes of fantasy, and just the kind of medieval vibe, right? And the myths of old, right? Almost all cultures have some kind of concept of, the slaying of the serpent, right? Harry slays the serpent with the Sword of Gryffindor, which I already brought up. Makes us think of like Excalibur or Mjolnir, from those kind of myths and legends. And the Sword of Gryffindor, it can absorb the basilisk venom, right? Almost like showing that the snake is the Ouroboros, the snake that eats itself. How evil is almost like it just kills itself, right? And it's like it can be used as a weapon against itself, right? And Fawkes comes in to bringing it back to Fawkes. Sorry, I know I'm all over the place. This is just, I'm experimenting with these kind of videos. If you want me to see more videos like this, I could certainly do it. I'm kind of just designing these as videos you can, listen to while you're doing the dishes or driving. That's kind of what I'm going for. Now, Fawkes comes in to aid Harry, gives him the sorting hat, which initially he thinks it's just a hat, and he's like, okay, I guess I got to go for it. And within it, when the snake emerges, the sword appears to him, right? He doesn't bring this sword in with him. It appears to him in a moment of need, right? And Fawkes was able to give that to him. Now Fawkes is, like I said, the kind of Holy Spirit type character, and he's also a master of the elements in the sense of the fourfold elemental structure of the ancient world: earth, wind, fire, water. Now he is the sort of master of all four of those elements, in the sense that fire, okay, he's a phoenix, right? So by nature. Water, his tears after Harry has the wound from the basilisk, his tears have healing powers. He's the master of earth because he rises from the ashes. And he's the master of the air, of course, because he's the bird, right? Like he's almost like the ultimate bird, right? Right, the Holy Spirit. He is also a foreshadowing of what Harry has to do and what will happen, right? The phoenix, the bird that dies and rises from the ashes, right? That's a classic Christian symbol, and that's what literally happens to Harry in the story. Now, there's just so many different, like I said, references to classical mythology throughout the castle of Hogwarts, right? Just interesting things like the Mirror of Erised, like all these things that carry, real moral and philosophical weight. They're not just cool objects or cool creatures. Like they actually do speak of a kind of real metaphysical presence. There's something real more going on there than just it's merely cool, which that is cool, but it's saying something deeper, right? Because I think this series is way more sophisticated than people give it credit for. This is kind of me, I guess, talking about it from the purview of the first two. I was kind of doing this as an experiment. So I guess the next thing I could do would be, the third one and the fourth one. Let me see what else I have. Hogwarts is not just a place you go to learn mere information or facts to turn you into a cog in the machine later in life. Teaches you practical skills and also to fall in love with education and myth itself. It re-enchants the world. It's not magic in the sense of deception or occultism. Rather, it shows us the light in the dark. That's what I was saying, how Hogwarts can also be interpreted as a sort of image of the church, right? It is the beacon of light, tradition, family, heraldry, hope, classicalism, in the dark, in a dark and fading world, right? Hogwarts is just this wonderful place of tradition, heraldry, right? Like the four house system, right? Now, let's see. Let me see. Well, I guess that's it for now. This is kind of my assessment of the first two Harry Potters. I think that's kind of what it came out to be. I'll post my subsequent ones. I'm going to do one for Prisoner of Azkaban and Goblet of Fire together, or I might just do Prisoner of Azkaban by itself. I just kind of threw this out to get my general feelings on Harry Potter, right? I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Yeah.